I still think Psycho is the scariest movie ever made. It breaks all the rules. After Janet Leigh's character is killed, the only person that you have to relate to is Norman Bates. And so without knowing it, the audience is becoming the Psycho themselves.
Psycho's pretty much the granddaddy of slasher films.
My mother wouldn't let me see it, but I saw it, and it was brilliant, you know. I visualized chocolate being blood.
I was in high school, and I just, you know, I mean, you'd never seen anything like that before.
That first one just blew my mind. One word, shower.
Most people were going out of their minds during the shower sequence. My friend went nuts at the end when he turns the chair around and Mother's
corpse face. And that was the scene that stuck with me more than any other. We used to always tease my little sister from then on for years. Mrs. Bates, stop me, stop. It definitely, it led the course to the rest of my life.
I've also always been impressed with how people fall down stairs in the Psycho movies. I wish I could fall downstairs like that, because I usually go just like straight down and roll, but these people just like keep falling, and I've always wanted to be able to do that.
And remember, Psycho was made during the heyday of Twilight Zone. People were watching the Twilight Zone every week on television, and they were going, oh, okay, what could the twist possibly be? The twist in Psycho is a great twist.
Everyone went and saw this movie. It didn't matter if you were a horror fan or not. Everyone, it was an event.
There's nothing that's more exciting for an audience when they realize that the director is not playing by the rules, is not playing fair.
Psycho brought to a mass audience and a Hitchcock audience and a Universal audience the idea that the killer was not a mutant, you know, didn't have dents in his head, could look like that nice young boy from next door. So it was definitely a watershed for that kind of film.
It was like a really low-budget movie, and you know, nobody expected it to be the enormous hit, nor the cataclysmic event it was in, you know, in terms of film history.
For Psycho 2, I mean, it's got big shoes to fill. It's almost like sacrilegious. It's like making a sequel to Vertigo, or Rear Window, or The Birds. Oh wait, they did make a sequel to The Birds.
They wanted to do it right, and then they didn't want, the same as I did, to just make something that wasn't in line with the original. And after they read Tom's script and everything, it was clear sailing.
I approached it with more trepidation because I was doing the sequel to Psycho, and I had sort of an overwhelming respect for Hitchcock. You didn't want to mess it up. You know, you really had almost a moral obligation to make something that stayed true to the original, yet updated it at the same time. And so we really worked hard, and then I think I checked 10 ways from Sunday to make sure that all the plot points in Psycho 2 fit in with the original. I mean, it really was, you know, the next step, what happens when Norman gets out.
What amazed me about Psycho 2 was that it was good. How could it possibly be so? You know, you've got this young Australian director who's not all that well established. He'd made a couple of films before that. And a script from a former actor. It turned out to be much better than anybody expected.
You could still get a hint of Hitchcock throughout that whole film. And I think it's a far superior sequel than a lot of stuff we've seen.
At the end of Psycho 2, when Norman hits the old lady with the shovel, it's just not something you see. Even in movies that pride themselves on being so depraved and so out there, you don't hit an old lady with a shovel.
That was Richard. He wanted to keep the ending hidden. He released the script without the last page or two. That's because we thought it was such a brilliant ending. We didn't want everybody and their brother to give it away.
And so first they drop this bomb on you that she's the one who killed all these people, and like that's not crazy enough. Like one of the Golden Girls went on a killing spree, but then he hits her with a shovel.
Richard may have been the one that came up with the idea of the shovel, of killing her with a shovel. I can't remember now, but we were going to kill her. And I think we were arguing about various ways for Norman to kill Mom.
Everyone in the theater cheered at that. Because I think more so because the whole spectacle nature of it.
I think Richard added the shovel.
Right.
I think Richard added the shovel. It's sort of stunning, isn't it?
Richard and I had the same sort of sense of humor, which was rather perverse. We'd laugh over murder sequences, you know, we'd be over the top, you know, like when Robert Loggia got stabbed and fell over the landing and landed on the knife. I showed that to Richard and to Hilton, and dead silence for a moment after, and then we just all burst out into laughter.
I was writing that stuff and I was rolling on the floor with laughter.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think a lot of that kind of stuff came out in Fright Night, which is my first directorial effort after writing Psycho 2.
The 80s were sleazy, and Psycho 3 embodies that.
I definitely remember watching Psycho 3 knowing that Anthony Perkins had directed it and seeing how much he was trying to sort of bring it back around again to the first one.
You go into Psycho 3 going, oh, another knockoff, here, and a quick cash in, and this movie starts out with there is no God, and it's shouted by a nun. And the first kill is by a nun.
Psycho 3 has the style of if Tobe Hooper and Dario Argento got together and make this film, because you have a lot of weird, odd, like unnatural colors. You can go off and say that it's neon infused, with the sign and everything, but there are colors in there that aren't natural. And once the shit starts collectively hitting the fan, the style just keeps warping itself into this weird kind of gonzo feel that you can see Terry Gilliam like, yeah, that's good,
So when I went into the meeting, I just remember seeing Anthony, and you feel that Norman is there. But then we started talking about it, and they said, "You want to read a little bit?" And I said, "Well, just do one of the scenes." I said, "You pick them." That's when I told him I memorized the whole screenplay. And so he picked one. Then we started doing it, and that's when I saw Norman. Now, I don't think I was intimidated, but I certainly was, he was amazing. He just flipped right into Norman like that. And we kicked it around a little bit and did a couple scenes, and the next thing you know, I had the job.
Tony had a clear-cut view on everything he wanted to do, and no one, and including Mr. Hitchcock, knew Norman Bates as well as Tony knew Norman Bates.
It was just so, I thought, intuitive and insightful and not pretentious. He ate with the cast and crew. He was just all about, movie making as a collaborative art, and he was, excited to be doing it. He was very cool that way. I adored him.
It was one of the most difficult parts I've ever done. And it's funny because I'm only alive, I think maybe the first quarter of the movie. I have just like maybe 3 or 4 scenes where I'm alive, and the rest of the movie I'm dead. And he carries me around dead because he was in love with my dead corpse. He would, after every take, say, "How was it for you?" Like we just made love, that was his thing. How was that? But he was very funny. He made me laugh a lot. And you wouldn't think that of Norman Bates.
I saw him in 3 different modes. I saw him comedic, having fun, just joking around, making fun of himself, making fun of the picture and, lightening things up. And then I saw him very serious, working on problems, trying to solve things that weren't going well, or just getting the choreography down for the movement of the camera and all that stuff. And then I saw him passionate, and the passion was the thing that impressed me the most as an actor, because that's what we look for.
Mother may not have been violent, but she was crazy. And she was somewhat sadistic, whether she knew it or not. She raised Norman very awkwardly. You don't punish a boy by putting him in a dress. You don't taunt him and have him pat rose water on you, then roll on the floor with you, and when he gets an erection, get furious with him and lock him in a closet. Literally in a closet, in a dress.
But the fact that they made Mother hot is weird, because I remember there's one shot with nudity in it when he's watching her, and it was like, damn, Mother's hot. No, you can't say it, but that made me feel disgusting and dirty as a viewer, because I thought she was hot and he thinks she's hot, and you're like, oh, that's gross. Like, what if you had a hot mom like that? I don't think my mom's hot. Ugh.
So, certainly that element of nurture had a lot to do with who Norman was. Would that drive someone to physical violence without having a a proclivity that maybe they were born with in their brain, their synapses, how they work. I don't know. I'm not a psychologist. You know, I had a script to work with that I thought worked really well.
Actually, the first time Mick screened it at Universal, it was just for a few of us and Anthony Perkins. Tony sat in the back of the theater, we were in the front, and when it was over, he rushed down to Mick and said, "This is by far the best of the sequels," and he was just so thrilled. I think Mick being a new director and being so young, that Anthony really felt he had to test Mick a lot, you know, test him while they were shooting, and it was very hard for Mick, but he won Mr. Perkins' admiration.
Psycho will always be relevant because every horror fan should put that on the top of their list and should see Psycho over and over again. You know, horror fans have to realize that, you know, there were films made before 1985. You know, they have to go back and discover their horror history, and you have to start, you know, pretty much start with Psycho. You know, that's really the movie that started it all.
Psycho is always at the root of every single one of those movies ever made, because what were the guys who made the fundamental slasher movies of the 70s, what were they watching 10 years earlier? They were watching Psycho.
You know, Psycho is a smart movie. You know, you never know where you stand on it until you've seen it. But it's one of those movies that you can go back and watch over again and pick up new things.
Psycho was the first of its kind and will always be iconic and will always be something. You know, there'll never be another Beatles, there'll never be another Psycho.
If the gothic monsters of the Universal horror movies of the 40s are the Beatles, and you get to the Atomic Age 50s and the Creature from the Black Lagoon is Elvis, then Norman comes along and he's like David Bowie in drag.
I've never talked about this. I've never talked about this before and haven't even thought about it since then.